Who owns Hawaii's water, and is there enough of it? Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Dan Boylan. Access to fresh, clean drinking water is critical to Hawaii's future. While supplies are plentiful for some of the state, parts of Maui and the Big Island are experiencing severe drought. In some of these same areas, streams have been diverted, forcing some farmers to leave their fields fallow. Who owns Hawaii's water, and is there enough of it? We invite you to join our conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. Now to our panel. Ernest Lau is the manager and chief engineer at the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. Ernie is responsible for ensuring the city can provide a safe and dependable and tasty drinking water. Is tasty in the? I'm not sure tasty's in there. Ed Wendt is a sixth-generation taro farmer in East Maui. Ed has been involved in contesting established water rights. Williamson Chang is a professor specializing in water rights at the University of Hawaii, William S. Richardson School of Law. William Tam is a deputy director of the State Department of Land and Natural Resources. As an attorney, Bill specialized in water, land use, and natural resources at the Attorney General's office, right? All right, Bill, you get first shot. Who does own Hawaii's water?
Actually, no one owns water. The state is the trustee of the water, and people have important use rights. It was established both in the Constitution and in our tradition. And what's interesting about Hawaii's water law is that we've come back to the old Hawaiian notion that we share in our uses, everybody has important needs, but no one owns water.
And yet, you've just spent 7 years, Ed, arguing for your rights to some water?
I believe it's 25 years.
25?
25 years.
Take us through the last 7.
Well, where I come from is a taro farming community. It's been in the 6th generation of farmer. In the 25 years in a contested case, when we first went to court and we were awarded a victory, the judge ordered 180 days to release the vai. It took 7 years. So we have been in a struggle for quite some time.
And you had to go to court to get it.
Yes, sir. And we are still in court.
And you're still in court about it. Now, the water code. I see the water code brought up in the literature on what's that all about?
The water code is a state law that regulates water. It was enacted into law in 1989. The goal was, Hawaii was one of the few states that didn't have any laws regulating water. There were crises during the 70s. There was a crisis on the question of ownership. There was a crisis in Pearl Harbor in terms of desalination of the water. There was that toxification of water in Mililani. The public became very concerned, and when they learned that there was no regulation of water, they pushed for a water code through the Constitutional Convention, and one was passed in 1989. Unfortunately, it divides the state into areas which are under protection and you need a permit to get water, and those areas which are not deemed so critical that you don't need a permit.
What's an example of an area where you need a permit?
Would be Waihole, or in the Iao area, or in the Waiha, the Four Waters of Maui. Those are where water crises are going on. There's two types of areas. One's a groundwater designation, and groundwater is water under the ground, and the other is a surface water designation, where there's streams or rivers that are flowing, and there's a crisis or there's an emergency in that area of the law.
Now, do you have enough water where you are?
We come off of surface water. The diverters divert over 60 billion gallons of water a year. And from what I hear, it's just as much as the island of Oahu for domestic use. Over 60 billion just come out of our area.
But do you have enough for your loading?
Well, we never had nothing. At one time we had abundance, but the diversions was increased. and until they took everything, till there was nothing left. Then we had to prove it in court that we need water. After all those years, we finally got some water released back into the taro fields.
Who are these diverters, Bill?
I think you ought to ask Ed. He's the
Who are the diverters?
Well, for us, and on our side of East Maui Irrigation, who's a subsidiary of Alexander and Baldwin, the sugar company. And East Maui Irrigation also, they transfer the water for the sugar and farming of sugar, but they also sell the county of Maui. I think something like anywhere between 8 to 12 million gallons a day that goes to the county, and they pay a fifth of a penny per 1,000 gallons. A fifth of a penny. That's all.
That's a bargain. Sounds like to me.
I think we all should get in the water business if we could get it for a fifth of a penny.
How much of this diversion is taking place, and where is it taking place?
Well, the diversions throughout the state are the old plantations primarily that diverted water from the windward side to the dry leeward side, or central Maui, for example, where there was a lot of sunshine but not much rainfall. And so these are historic systems that have been around for a very long time. The Water Code, as Bill mentioned, is a transitional document by which we're taking some old practices and seeing how we must reorganize ourselves for the future. One of the things that is of concern to us is the declining rainfall that's occurring around the islands, and that is occurring for a variety of reasons, but one of which I think maybe I can show simply on a chart, if you could put that up.
They'll put it up.
Okay.
It'll be here in a second, I'm sure. That chart, there it is. All
Okay,
right.
if you look at that chart, what you'll see is that there's two pressures on the rain clouds that hit the windward sides of the islands. One is the normal event of trade winds hitting the mountains and rising up. The other is the trade wind inversion, which is when there's fewer trade winds and there's a pressure downward. The net effect of that is to shrink the thickness of the clouds now hitting the windward sides of our islands. That means less rainfall is getting on the ground. And there's one other aspect to that is, as exotic plants move up the mountains, like strawberry guava, there's a very high evaporation rate. So the net effect is that the average rainfall now hitting the islands has declined by 10 to 12% in the last 30 years, and the stream flows are down about 20% over the last 100 years. So the water that Ed talked about in terms of what the taro patches had, what was available, is declining. Now it varies from year to year, but nonetheless, this is going to become a more serious problem because the leeward sides of the islands are going to become even more dry than they have been in the past. And the variation in the rainfall is going to become higher. So we're going to have to take some steps aggressively to take new measures to deal with this problem.
You know, Ernie, I have sympathy for Ed, but I have real concern about whether I'm going to have drinking water over the next 10 or 15 years on Oahu.
For Oahu, it's a different situation where we're blessed with really good underground aquifers, probably some of the largest in the state. For example, Oahu's sustainable yield for groundwater is about 400 million gallons of water a day. And roughly right now we're using probably about only half of it. Large-scale sugar, unlike Maui, has gone out of business on Oahu. There isn't as much agricultural water demand on Oahu competing for the water use, the groundwater. So we believe that there'll be adequate supplies for, the 10, 20-year range. However, that doesn't mean that we aren't.
Look at this guy, 10 to 20 years, with no farms. They're still able to take out half of the water. So how many businesses